Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. London Fire Brigade protects one of the most complex urban environments on the planet. The resident population of London sits at just under 9 million. But that number is misleading. On a typical weekday when commuters, tourists and transient populations are added in, the number of people moving through this city regularly swells to up to 12 million, sometimes more during major events or peak travel periods. Around a quarter of all fire and rescue service calls in the UK come into London, and around 70% of the UK's high-rise residential stock sits within the M25. It's not just a big fire brigade, it's a service operating on a global city scale with global risks. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Jonathan Smith, Commissioner of London Fire Brigade, to talk about what it takes to lead and be part of a service like that in today's operating environment. We start a little around Jonathan's journey into the fire service from training to operational life through promotion and leadership. But this is by no means a career timeline conversation. It's a working discussion about responsibility, decision-making, and pressure at scale. We're going to talk a lot about training and professional standards, what we lost after the early 2000s, and what it really means to professionalise a modern fire service. We explore high-rise firefighting in London, lesson learned from Grenfell, and how evacuation, control, and operational command have fundamentally changed over the last decade. Our conversation deliberately looks beyond a single service or even a single country. We try and frame London alongside other global cities like New York, Paris, and Tokyo, because the risks London faces don't stop at national borders. We're talking climate change, lithium battery fires, terrorism, urban density, and geopolitical tensions, which all show up on the streets of this city, and the fire service has to be ready for that reality. We also get into things like culture, not as a buzzword, but as a lived behaviour, talking leadership, accountability, psychological safety, and what it actually takes to create an organisation where people can do their best without fear or silence. And finally, we zoom in on the personal cost of leadership, resilience, and how to stay grounded when the stakes are this high. This is a boots on the ground conversation about the future of firefighting, leadership in complex systems, and how our profession can still continue to play a hand in shaping its own destiny. I'll see you on the other side. So where did you do your training?
Well, I actually did my training at Surrey Fire and Rescue Service, even though the first service that I joined was Norfolk. It's a long and convoluted story, the truth be told, because funny enough, London was actually the brigade that I wanted to join right in the beginning, but there was a bit of a recruitment crisis at the end of the 90s, beginning of the noughties, where there was a hold on all recruitment.
Yeah, they did a freeze across most UK FRS, about 5 years-ish, wasn't it?
I think I've still got the letter at home, actually, that basically said, look, if you want to wait 18 months, the next recruit course is in 18 months' time.
Nice.
But actually, you might want to go and join another fire and rescue service, and we might have you back after your 2 years probation. A mate of mine had just moved to Norwich, and I was telling him this tale of woe. I'm a Watford boy, so Watford's my hometown. I was telling him this tale of woe, and he said, well, I've just seen in the local newspaper, which dates me, Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service are recruiting for firefighters. He says, why don't you try and get in here? He says, you can live with me for a couple of years, and then you can transfer back to London. So that's basically what I did. I ended up...
How old would you have been then?
I was 22 then.
2?
Yeah, so this is in 99, 2000.
First time going for it?
Well, I'd gone for London first, so London was the first one that I was going through. But yes, in terms of getting into Norfolk, I was lucky enough to get in the first time of trying, which I know is a very rare occurrence.
It's very hard for people. They do a lot of, we still encourage people to visit the stations, do this, but so much of it's online now. You know, we have the mental arithmetic and everything like that. And I know Hannah Valance's company, they do the values recruitment stuff. I spoke to the NFCC about that.
Yeah, I think it was very different. It was very different to all of that. It was very different to all of that, Pete, I can assure you. But
did you do the chest expansion tests and things like that?
All of that, you know, the bleed test and the whole range of things. I think the hearing test was the doctor actually whispering into my ear, fire, and whether or not I could hear it or not. That was about the extent. That was about the extent of it. But I was fortunate enough to get into Norfolk. And then, the original plan was I was going to come back to London after a couple of years.
I'm assuming you didn't tell Norfolk that.
I did not tell Norfolk that.
I would love to be here for 30 years.
All of that. But I ended up enjoying myself so much at the station that I was posted to. So I was posted to Norwich City Fire Station, which sadly isn't there anymore. Well, the building's still there because it's listed, but it was one of the old 1930s buildings. And the first watch that I joined, Red Watch at Norwich City, it was a 21-man watch, and it was all men then. Two pumps, 2 specials, the boat, and it went to everything because Norfolk was predominantly a rural service. We spent a lot of the time backing up the on-call retain service as well as dealing with anything that was in Norwich. And I just enjoyed myself, Pete, so much on the watch.
It's a great station to start at.
It was a
massive
great
watch.
place,
got the boat as well.
Place to learn your trade. Yeah, great place to learn your trade. I stayed there for 8 years. So the original plan to transfer back all went out the window because I was enjoying it and really relishing the role. And then eventually I got to a point where I was looking to kick on in my career, and I'd got up to sub-level at that time, and Norfolk's a small service, and there just was no real movement into where I wanted to go. And so it looked as if Hertfordshire and services in the southeast were looking to recruit junior officers coming back down. So I thought, actually, the time's right to go back, and I ended up going to Hertfordshire and was based at Stevenage. But in terms of my training, which was the original,
No. Yeah.
Norfolk didn't have an internal training capability at the time. So we were outsourced, if I can put it that way, to Surrey. So I did my training at Reigate, Surrey's training base in Reigate, which I don't know if you've ever been.
Strange, because back then, a lot of people were still sending people to the college, weren't they?
Yeah.
Because the college was mid-2000s, it got bought by Capita, something like that. I can't remember.
Have been around that, so 4 or 5. It was one of the things that came out of the dispute in 2002, 3.
Yeah.
So it would have been around that time. So I did my recruits training in Surrey, which was actually quite useful because I was still living in Watford at the time.
Nice.
And it was a phenomenal training facility at Reigate. It was a really good place to learn. Again, the 8 years that I had at Norwich City Fire Station was a great place to learn.
Stay at Norwich for 8 years on the same station?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Moved around a couple of watches with promotion, so leading firefighter up to sub-officer, so dotted around a bit. But yeah, I had eight years riding the trucks at Norwich, and I just loved it. It was a phenomenal place to be a firefighter. And
MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years. And they are the global leader in development, manufacture and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake. Because I get really itchy. I get itchy feet staying at places for too long.
Yeah.
I get on well, it's not for me to say, but I think I got on well with everybody. But I enjoy the stations I'm at. But then I don't know if it's FOMO or whatever. But actually, in the place that I work, the stations don't have as many specials and stuff like that. So you kind of got to move around if you want to go. TL, an Alp, the water, the tech rescue.
All of that was there. So it was all there.
So
I got to play on all of that.
I can get why you'd be like, why would I move? Do you know what I mean? I like going around the watches. That's a good shout. Did you get promoted on the same watch? I know a lot of this is ages ago, so forgive our memories.
Yeah, temporarily, to start off with temporarily. So I did a bit of temporary as a leading hand on Red Watch at Norwich, which was the first watch that I was on, but that wasn't for very long. I was then substantiated onto Green Watch, still at Norwich, which... and there's always fors and against, isn't there? That whole discussion.
I was going to say, what are the fors and against for you? Because do you think that's the hard? Because some people say that's the hardest move, and some people say going to station manager in the vast majority of services, or ride station officer, or station commander. What's the hardest shift? Because I think those are the two ones where you notice some of the biggest change. I don't know.
So you're completely right, Pete. So the two biggest moves, and I certainly felt this in my career, were from firefighter to leading firefighter, as it was at the time, still is in London.
Yeah,
that is a huge move, because you are stepping into that managerial leadership position. Your relationship with your fellow firefighters is different, despite what anyone may tell you, or it should be. And that's another discussion. But that is a big leap. Once you've actually made that decision that you want to progress your career in that way through promotion, then I think that's a big psychological step for anyone in the organisation.
Do you think it's as much of a conscious move? Because you said like people are making the decision to progress their career. Mine was out of boredom and also a bit of curiosity, because I was like, I mean, people might see this in services. These are my words, not yours. But some people are like, who's sitting in the front? My goodness. I'll tell you what, I'm not following them.
Well, they probably did think that, Pete, but
not by you, but like sometimes you see people, you're like, but that's what I mean. I'm like, the good ones should go for it. Sometimes the really passionate ones will stay a firefighter for a very long time. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But I'm also like, if the really passionate, great firefighters don't go for it, then you'll be there sat there going, who? And I'm like, well, you didn't go for it, did you?
Well, I'm going to sound like I'm swinging a lantern here, which I always have to be a bit careful of. But of course, when I was in that position, the old statutory exams were in play. And when I came out of training school, actually the advice that was given to me is that now you're in that learning mode, actually you might as well put yourself forward to do the leading firefighters exams. And actually, in many ways, that's more straightforward than the old qualified. So I don't know if you remember those, the old qualified exam.
Someone sent me one of them the other day.
Really? Yeah. Well,
the old ones, because a lot of the questions are so relevant. Like, mate, we could get into that rabbit hole. Well, building construction and stuff.
I was a big fan of the statutory exams. Pete. I think that was a huge mistake to get rid of those. But I'd come out of training school and I was encouraged to do the leading firefighters exams because I said, one, you're already in that learning headspace, and I get that. And the other bit was actually to do your leading firefighters is in many ways a bit easier than the old qualified that you used to have to do. So if you remained at firefighter level, after 4 years, you had to do your qualified. And actually that was a really, really good test. You had every bit of kit out on the yard, you went through it really, really thoroughly. And actually in many ways, the leading firefighters were slightly easier. So there was that.
You see a lot of people come out their apprenticeships now. A lot of services and brigades do apprenticeships now. And they're encouraged to go straight in for their IFE level 3s. And I'm like, because you basically know it. Everything you had to talk about in your professional discussion, you had to probably do in some of your exams and all of your coursework and whatever the other work is. You kind of know it already. But I do also see the flip side, not agree with it, but I hear a lot of your LFs and everybody else going, who do you think you are? Oh, you've been in the year, you're going for promotion. I'm like, that's not necessarily what they're doing. I'd like most of my firefighters to be safe to command. Because I think it gives them a more holistic understanding of my decision rationale and what I'm trying to achieve on the incident ground. So I want them all to be drivers. I want them all to be safe to command. And we're not going to get into the payment thing around drivers, but like, that's what I would love them all to do because it's resiliency in the watch. But some people are like, who do you think you are? You've just joined, going for promotion straight away. And I think that's not a great part of the culture, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of that about.
And we have to get over ourselves. We really do. And the experiences people bring in any given situation is something that we need to make sure we nurture and give people the confidence to go forward. And if they're showing the right attributes, if they've got the right values and they've got the right support and they're prepared to learn and listen and don't think they know it all, then why on earth do we not want to encourage those individuals to come through the organisation? But you're right, there probably was always a historical blocker there. Well, you haven't done enough time, or how long's enough time? What does experience? 20 years of doing something badly is 20 years of doing something badly. It's all of that conversation.
Yeah, I think some people, like if they've done, sometimes it's 20 years at the edge of the universe, and that's not a slight on any particular organisation, station or service, but I'm like, you might just have 1 year of service 20 times. Whereas some people in, not just the inner cities, but in, there are some very, very busy rural ones. Like I started at a rural station. We had a lot of high-speed RTCs, we had a lot of thatch fires, a lot of chimney fires, stuff that people have never been, you have a car crash in the middle of London, with respect, most of the time it's probably going to be 20, 30 miles an hour. You know what I mean? You might get the odd nasty one, but people get out of the main city and they start opening it up on the roads. So most of my fatalities were out there, but I also still wanted to move around. How long was your recruits training when you joined? Because there's a massive spectrum
20
of
weeks.
what people. 20 weeks.
Yeah.
It was 20 weeks
and it was residential. So you went So you went down there on the Sunday evening, and then you were obviously there the Sunday night, and then you were straight into it Monday all the way through to Friday, and then you left Friday afternoon, and it was intense.
What an immersive experience!
It was
that immersion in building a team like that. And we said about the exams and stuff a minute ago, like building construction is one I'm quite passionate about. My dad ran a building firm for 40-something years. So he was like dragging me around jobs after school saying about this and that. And I was rolling my eyes, just wanted to go and get a bag of chips. But like, he would tell me about all of these things and, you know, the lintels and the eaves and the purlins and and the rafters. So I was really interested in a lot of that. And when the IFEs, in my words, started falling out of popularity, I don't know if popularity is the right word, but a lot of places don't necessarily mandate them anymore. And we didn't really replace it with anything. And I'm wondering, this is a bit of a provocative one, but I'm like, we've seen some really nasty debriefs and or incidents in the past couple of years, which may or may not have things relating to understanding of construction elements to them. And I feel like that is a hollow spot in our knowledge that no one is really grabbing hold of.
Massive. In my view, Pete, we deprofessionalised the sector after the 2002-3 dispute. It's all, okay. And I say that with no moral authority whatsoever, because I was on a strike during that dispute, just the same as everybody else was.
I was well.
But the outcome was appalling across a whole range of different. And I don't blame anyone in particular or anyone.
It is what it is. But yeah,
it was what it was. But one of the things that we did was we threw the baby out with the bathwater, as we're always guilty of doing from time to time. Because did the fire service need reforming from the 80s and 90s and early noughties? Of course it did. You know, there were a number of things that we needed to look at when we were looking at the threats and challenges that the sector was facing. But it didn't mean that everything was bad. And things like the statutory exams in particular, but national standards right across the board, all of that went on a bonfire of localism, which we've been paying a price for over the course of the last 20 years. I've always been firmly of that view. And I think one of the opportunities with things like a College of Fire is to reset that professionalism with national standards, with that consistency that's right across the board. Because your example about the recruits course is absolutely right. You know, our recruits in London will do something different to recruits in Cornwall, who will do something different to recruits in Tyne and Wear, who will do something different to recruits in West Mids. That's bonkers. There will always need to be some localisms, because actually what you need a firefighter to do in Cornwall will be slightly different at times to what I need them to do in Soho or Paddington or Poplar.
Yeah, your PPE, your kit, your equipment, your IRMP will be variations.
Exactly.
But let's agree with the marker and the sand to start with, shall we?
Completely. Now, all of that, you know, was a result of what happened after that 2002-3 dispute. And when you got into that whole period, and you've probably done a similar time to me, Pete, but you got into that whole period in the noughties and into the 10s where there's this whole risk aversion piece that came out, what the role of the fire service was. For me, all of that was linked to the deprofessionalisation of the sector that started after the 2002-3 dispute. Now, the good thing is I think there is a real opportunity to reset all of that moving forward.
Firefighters, police officers and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly. And that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know who Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. Go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now. I think we've got like a 5 to 8 year window And I've spoken a lot to Phil and Dan Stevens and a few other people about these elements, because there's some people don't realize. That's why I like the podcast. People don't realize the amount of work that genuinely is going on behind the scenes. You said like you had a chat with a load. I didn't know you had chats every 2 weeks with all the chiefs and all that jazz. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of touch points and pulse checks and people trying to align. I do think we need. I mean, me and Phil are going to do some more stuff about the College of Fire, about talking about what that truly is, what it looks like, because people in their minds have obviously got something in the Cotswolds built in their heads, which is not what it's going to be. I won't say never, but you're probably never going to get that one back.
Well, I think the college in the Cotswolds will be an element to it.
Yes, it will only be centres of excellence.
Exactly. It will only be one element, because one of the things that also happened after sort of 2005-06, when the college was sold to Capita, is that a number of other services really invested in their own internal training facilities.
Yes.
So now we've got some phenomenal training facilities across the country. If you look at what Merseyside have got, you look at what Manchester have got, you look at what West York. Yeah. I was in Scotland last week for the PPE trials. We had 20 London firefighters up in Scotland last week testing.
Yeah, I spoke to Vicky from MSA. She said she saw you lot up there.
Yeah, testing the new. We took it over really for a whole week. But then it was a reminder about how good the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service College is. So all of these, and the new one in Northern Ireland, so I'm going to have a look at that at the end of June.
Yeah.
They've invested in...
Is that Finn, or is that Finn Monaghan's?
No, Aidan Jennings in Northern Ireland. Yeah,
Sorry,
Finn, South Wales, I think.
Yes, my bad. I'm terrible. My brain, you know what Dunbar's number is?
No, regarding those as Celtic Brothers.
It's just fallen off the edge of where. That's horrific. Sorry, Finn.
But what there are phenomenal training facilities that exist all across the country.
Some of them have come at a big cost.
They have.
Like Scotland. So people, Scotland is amazing. It is. It's gone from 8 services to 1.
Yeah.
Like, how many people want to volunteer for that? We spoke about regionalisation and stuff, a little, 7 years ago?
I think this will be a hot topic of debate, Pete, moving forward, because if you look at what the Home Secretary's proposed for policing, then it's not going to take a huge leap of faith to see a direction of travel that fire may or may not go in. But if you end up, I think police would have to go first. Because I think policing is just bigger. It has more political heft to it.
More heft, more legal powers.
But if you look at what happened in Scotland, and funny enough, I was having this discussion with Stuart, the chief in Scotland, who I know well, and he was saying that, first of all, there was Police Scotland, so that moved to a single force, and then fire actually followed quite quickly after that. And I think if we did end up changing the structures of English fire and rescue services, it would be because police have done it first. I also think that in order for us, if we thought that was the right model, you would have to get the College of Fire right first before you looked at any. Because if you haven't got national consistency, if you haven't got national standards that people can coalesce around, then trying to merge services or do anything different is going to be nigh on impossible and wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I think there's a number of things that have got to happen before we even get into that debate. And I want to concentrate on getting the College of Fire right first. But if you're asking me, do I think 44 English Fire and Rescue Services is a sustainable model for the future? Well, the answer to that is no.
No. And I think, like you say, in conversations with Phil and other people, when we get in, I'm sure we're already in those rooms, but when we start formally getting invited into those rooms of, right, we're looking at joining things, we've got to show that we've got our ducks in a row. We have got to at least say, well, that's all right, because we're up to pace. We're all on the same page. Actually, we'll make this work. Otherwise, they'll go, what are you doing? No, right, stop. You two, you're together now, and I'll just tell you what to do. And then we'll get taken over.
We have to shape our own destiny, Pete. That's
got to be grown-ups. We've got to be grown-ups.
What exactly that's going to look like, I think, has got to be the right. Because it's easy. It's easy for me as the London Fire Commissioner to say, let's move to a regional model, where the chances are London would be a region in its own right anyway.
Yeah, you have to be very honest of you.
You have to be very respectful of because I've worked in other services and I know the history and how they're embedded within their local structure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you were reinventing English fire now, it wouldn't look as it currently does. And I think if that's your starter for 10, then you have to be honest about that and then think about what the direction of travel is going to be. But there's a hell of a lot of water that needs to pass under the bridge first. And as I say, we've got to get a College of Fire right before we even have a conversation around what restructuring of fire and rescue services could look like, in my view.
There's so many threads I want to pull on from our first sort of 30 minutes together there, but there's one I want to jump into because it was at the bottom of some of the things we spoke about discussing. You mentioned around Manchester a second ago. We had some listeners send some bits and bobs in. Manchester's got a great high-rise rig. It's not perfect. Been there, used it many times with Dave and the others. However, London's quite clearly got more high-rises, I think even just in the Tower Hamlets, than probably the rest of the country put together. How do we square that, or how do you and the team and everybody else square that circle of why haven't we got a training facility? Manchester's not a stone's throw from London. It's going to have to be quite a travel if you wanted to take everybody there to train on it. What's the kind of thought process around not having that kind of element for your crews?
Well, we obviously have some restrictions in London in terms of just the geography of the city itself, land availability.
Extremely expensive.
Building something like the Scots have got, or even Manchester or Merseyside or West Yorkshire or anyone else in London is tricky. And there are environmental restrictions in terms of real fire training and a whole range of it, all for the right reasons. Oh, no. But it makes within the M25 is a congested space, and it's difficult to actually put something in place that meets everything that I would want our firefighters to experience. I think the real thing for me now, Pete, is just what these options are now nationally that we've got available to us. Because I don't know if you're aware, but for the last 18 months, we've been sending London firefighters down into the Fire Service College to really get into real fire training, use of positive pressure ventilation, which the rest of the country were using 20 years ago. You know, I
remember about 4 years ago or 5 years ago being on a TAC vent course.
We are playing catch up. Playing catch up.
That's okay. Yeah.
But what it's proven to me, because we've nearly put nearly 4,500 firefighters and officers through a TAC vent fire behaviour course down at the Fire Service College, training as a watch with quality instructors in a real live fire environment. They've relished it.
I bet they loved it.
So it's proven the concept. So for me, it's about taking that forward, and rather than looking at building something all fancy in London, which is going to be very difficult to do, let's look at what nationally we've got across the country, which I can then send our firefighters and control officers to, so that they get that real quality experience. But it doesn't have to be in London. It can be elsewhere, because the facilities now exist probably in a way that they didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. That's why I am so excited about what the College of Fire could get us to. You know, I'm speaking to Phil on a regular basis, because I think certainly for us as a service, the ability to have those national standards, that national consistency with centres of excellence dotted around the UK, which we can then send our firefighters to, is the direction of travel that I want to move our training into. And I think the more
it helps with the argument of standardization as well, because with respect to the college, whilst it was incredible and still is, you know, pretty great, they did just get a monopoly on everything, and people would do secondments to it, and there was an argument for you know, shared knowledge and all that sort of jazz. But if the offshoot became everyone does their own thing, well, yeah, everyone gets a nice training center, sort of, but also then they just start peering off slowly into different directions. Whereas if we did send everybody to Scotland for this, or Merseyside for, you know, USAR, and, you know, whatever, Manchester or anywhere for high rise, do you know what I mean? There's a much better argument for standardization there. I worry about the capacity element and how often we could get people there. I'm sure you would just do a sort of risk profile of the most likely stations in your organization to go to high rises and then send those. But if you start trying to extrapolate that out to the 40 something services, I think certain centres of excellence would reach a capacity, or you just have to stretch the timeline to a 2-3 year.
We would swap any individual services.
Exactly. How many firefighters have you got again?
In a moment, we are now at 4,700 operational firefighters on station, and then of course we've got another cadre of about 300 officers on top of that from the ranks of station commander.
Did Scotland give you the poke when I remember when the last time I spoke to Stu, or probably somebody else on his team, and he was like, London always say they're the biggest. We've got 6,000. So let's just put that out there from the UK Fire and Rescue. But no, he's like,
listen, Pete. In terms of numbers, they've got more fire. The thing I always say is we're very good value for money. So if you look at our population size, our operational boundary stretches out to the M25. Now, that's a population of 10 million people. That's 10 million people that we know about. There's probably another million on top of that we know nothing about. And then
the tourism.
Yeah. Well, and then you get people coming in to commute and work. So that's probably another 1.5 million on top of that. So you're getting close to 12 million on a day-to-day basis. Scotland's got a population of 5 million. So, but
some of their stations, you have to take a day's travel on a boat to get there.
I mean, it's a totally different
You get moved stations there, you might be looking at a 4-hour, 5-hour drive.
But the point I always make about the resourcing of London, while we're on this subject, Pete, is that you can't compare us actually to anyone in the UK, because that's an unfair comparison. It's an unfair comparison on those services. It's an unfair comparison on London. What you have to do is look at London as a genuinely global city. So our peers are New York, they're Paris, they're Tokyo. A mile opposite number in New York can call upon 11,000 firefighters. My opposite number in Paris can call upon 8,000. My opposite number in Tokyo can call upon 16,000. So although we're well resourced when you look at the rest of the UK, that's absolutely true. That's not fair comparison. Because when you're a global city, and under every metric, London certainly is, actually, we're pretty modest. For the risk profile that we sit on, we are pretty modest as an organisation when you compare us to New York, for example.
I was speaking to an economist the other day, random segue, but he gave a much better reframing to me when he talked about economies, because he said, the UK is one of the X largest economies in the world. I don't know what it is. I don't think he said top 5. He said something. And then he said, but that's what people say. What they actually mean is London is one of the biggest economies attached, with respect, and I don't live in London, to a much poorer country. This just is what it is. And London has to compare itself from security, from infrastructure, from first responders on a global scale. So the argument, like you say, doesn't hold if so-and-so from Exfordshire starts going, they've got, we've got. And we're like, you're not comparing apples with apples, unfortunately. It just is what it is. It's a bit of an enigma in that capacity. But is that part of the reason some people do the whole, London will just do whatever they like? And I'm like, but they're not mathing with the same math sometimes. The scale of it is a bit mind-boggling.
I think we've been guilty in the past, Pete, if I'm brutally honest, of being too inwardly looking. Because we do a quarter of all the UK's fire and rescue service calls come into the London Operating Centre down at Merton.
Jesus.
We have a different operating model just by the nature of the city that we've got responsibility for. 70% of the UK's high-rise stock sits within the M25. I
want to come and see your new control centre.
Yeah.
Did I meet the lady that was in charge of it, the Blue Light Show? Was that
Joe Smith? Yeah, you would have met Joe Smith.
Yeah, she's really interesting. I'd love to come and see the new one. That's banging. It's not very new now. It's quite a number of years old.
We're one of the few services who were actually in the original regional control centre, if you remember that particular project, which didn't go particularly well, and there's a whole range of reasons why that didn't work.
Yeah.
But we're actually in our original regional control centre, which is down in Merton, and actually the changes that have been made in control post Grenfell have been extraordinary, and Joe's really led that.
That's what she was talking on. I think that's been one of the biggest success stories off the back.
I would always encourage it. If you want to see a visible sign of change of the London Fire Brigade, one of the best places you can go is the London Operating Centre, and what they've done down there in control has been.
Do you know who else is fascinating? I don't know if he still works there. Sorry, we had Apollo Girolabos on.
He doesn't work for us. He doesn't work for us any longer, sadly.
Anyway, whoever his new person is, the data team in London. Really fascinating. Like you look at a lot of I know we're going totally off our segue. Sorry, I'll drag us back in a minute. But most of the services have one or half a person doing the job of data analysis, population density, call profiles, blah, 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 blah. London, I think you had when he was there, he was 10 people in the team or something. I don't know what it is. And that, just to cycle back to a privilege of having capacity to think, like me with the podcast or anybody with anything, sometimes you're too busy working on the thing, you can't actually think wider and see where are we going next. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of fire and rescue services have gone down to a skeleton crew. And I think we're missing a massive trick. Massive, colossal trick. And I see some of the best practice when I look at the London team. Some of the analytics that you guys do, some of the... He was talking to me about language learning models and being able to retrospectively go back through all of the call profiles, all of the fire survival guidance calls, and use that. I don't know if they ever did that or if they're still doing it, but the language learning models and then pulling out key themes and then using. And I was like, we are like this is like where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. This is where services get better and better and better because they have capacity to think. Do you know what I'm saying?
I completely get what you're saying, Pete.
It's massive, isn't it? Quick pause, because I want to tell you about a new partnership we have with First Tactical. First Tactical builds equipment for people who work when environments are seriously unforgiving. And if you go to their website, you'll find kit is designed specifically for us, for firefighters, for police officers, technical rescue teams, fire investigation, hazardous materials teams, urban search and rescue. This is honestly the equipment that you really want to rely on. It's built for real operations, real pressure, long ass days, and I genuinely use this stuff. Here's a few of my favorites. They've got their men's Defender short sleeve. I've got that in black. It's got a huge load of specialized pockets, space for all of our gears, the pads, the pens, all of the stuff. It's got them on the sleeves on both sides. Also got the Defender pants. These have got 28 pockets in total on them. It's mad. Let's be honest, we absolutely love the bags. I use their 25-litre specialist half-day backpack. The shoulder straps as well are strong AF. Like I say, this isn't lifestyle gear. It's built for real world, real operations. We talk about the realities of the job, and First Tactical is just the ideal partnership for us. So go take a look, firsttactical.co.uk. Now back to the show.
Data and being savvy with data and using it to drive improvement and improve performance, again, been one of the key learnings for us as an organisation over the last 5 to 6 years. And the data sets that we've now got available that are helping to improve, because that's the key thing. Data's data unless you actually use it to drive improvement. That's been the big thing. We've always actually been quite data rich as an organisation. The bit that was always missing was transferring it into strategy
analysis
and then delivery and the analysis. And now we still got, I still think there's more we can do, and there's still a lot I think we can do around AI where we need to challenge ourselves to be more ambitious. All of that's true. But in terms of us as an organisation now really understanding the data, all of the demographics that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and then using that to drive improvement is unrecognisable, Pete, from where we were.
Do you do much work with academics on this stuff? I know Rowena Hill is the head of ACER or whatever, ACER, Academic Research Collaboration something, NFCC. I love talking to academics. If we just let more academics sometimes into our organisations, because like you just said, we go, all this data, as long as you sign the thing that says GDPR on it, have a look at this because we're not entirely sure what to do with it. We've got so much data, and I love speaking to academics because the crossover of the needs of the population and behavioural change in populations is really, really fascinating. If you speak to a good sociologist or psychologist around, we had someone on for crowd population densities and how people panic, and I'm like, they're fascinating, but that's a random segue. I want to drag us back onto some of our points. You mentioned about budget. We'll mention the massive numbers because I think it's interesting to see where do we think the priorities are. I think we had written down something like £750 million as London Fire. Is that roundabouts there or thereabouts?
Yeah, revenues around the 570 million mark, give or take.
It's obscene. For some people to wrap their head around, but it's all relative to what you're actually trying to achieve.
Well, completely.
What do you think are some of the bigger? Because I think there's loads of learnings that have come from the past 10 years. Some massive incidents have had enough time, probably on a global scale, and I imagine some of those are still being embedded. You mentioned the control room, post Grenfell, and stuff like that, but we need to keep looking forwards. Doesn't mean ignore the past. Certainly means learn from it. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges not just you, but obviously the organisation are facing for smarter spending with something like this? Because you've got to have a much longer time horizon, I imagine, with something as large as London Fire Brigade.
Well, I suppose my starting point, Pete, is that we're probably dealing with the most challenging operational environment for a generation, the truth be told. So if I look at what we're tipping firefighters out to on a day-to-day basis, so we're rescuing 6 Londoners a day at the moment from a whole variety of different incident types. Every third day, we're pulling a Londoner out of a fire situation. We're averaging now, I think, about 1 high-rise fire a day. We did a record number of e-bike and e-scooter fires last year. I think we were over 200. We did a record number of
the scary ones.
We did a record number of
we don't understand that yet.
No, and we did a record number of wildfires since 2022, last summer. So the operational challenge that not just London, but actually more broadly across the sector that we face is significant. And what we've got to make sure is that we've got the agility to move as risk continues to change. So I always use wildfire and lithium-ion batteries as a good example. So 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I wasn't having a discussion about what. It wasn't a thing. Then 2022, certainly not in London anyway. Other colleagues across the
Wales were, but
certainly not in London. Then 2022 happens, and we've got LFB firefighters operating in 40, 41 degree heat, 15 significant incidents spread right across the geography of London, and we used every one of our appliances. We couldn't draw upon national resilience assets because all of our home county services were also dealing with their own issues. And we simply weren't having that conversation 5, 6, 7 years ago. Similarly, we were not having that conversation around e-vehicle fires and e-bikes and e-scooters. Lay on top of that, one of the, if not the most complicated built environment in Western Europe. Then the challenge of international and domestic terrorism, which has not gone away anywhere. If you look at the awful events in Sydney, Australia, and then you look at what happened in Manchester last year, that could easily happen in London, and sadly will do at some stage. You've then got an international operating context that is more complicated and more challenging than it's been since the end of the Second World War. And all of that plays out on the streets of London, Pete. I'll give you an example. So the war in Ukraine, we had a fire in Leighton in 2024. I can say this now because it's in the public domain. We had a fire in Leighton in 2024, which was a Ukrainian business, and it was linked to the Wagner Group. So when we have, this is what I'm saying around the whole nature of being a global city, is that when you have these international tensions that play out what can seem a million miles away, they play out on the streets of London.
You get the ripples
in a way that they don't in other parts of the UK, and we have to be prepared and ready to respond to that. On top of all of those other challenges that I was just alluding to. So, in amongst all of that, what we have to have is agility in our training offer, because the thing that we have to make sure we keep pace with is the changing nature of risk. Fighters are not getting the training that actually reflects what they are going to on a day-to-day basis, then we've got a real capability gap there that we've got to do something about. So that's why my biggest priority around our budget, and it seems 570 million seems like an awful lot of money, but again, my opposite number in New York has got £1.5 billion to play with. And New York, in comparison to London, is very comparable, both in terms of population size, profile, demography, a whole range of metrics. It's a very comparable city. So we are actually very good value for money, you would expect me to say, but I genuinely believe that. And then I look at the money
with
that
what you're being
got
expected to
go on
achieve.
training. Sorry, go on.
With what you're being expected to achieve is very valuable for money. We're never going to be able to pull on all those threads, but the technology one. So the wildfire one is frustrating because, we'd like to have been working with environment agencies. I hate it when we feel surprised by stuff. It makes me feel dumb because we're not being invited into these rooms early enough when things like technological development's happening. It's like you've got kids in a back bedroom making something and you're in charge of the house, that if something goes wrong, you're going to have to go in the bedroom and sort it out. And you get in there and you realize they've made a nuclear reactor and you're like, whoa. Yeah. Why did you not tell me about this 3 weeks ago when you started buying stuff? And I feel like, capitalism and industry it was always outpacing us a bit. We're always playing catch up, but now it just seems to be extrapolating and accelerating away for us in the distance, throwing challenges over its shoulder for us to try and deal with. From your level, from the NFCC's level, how are we plugging into the tip end of that sword, or at least a bit further up the sword, to help better prepare for these things ahead of time? Because it very much feels a reactive approach from all of us, myself included, in certainly things like lithium ion, and they live amongst us. I can't imagine the number of e-scooters and everything that are just littered across London, as an example.
There are lots, Pete. I can assure you. But your point.
I'm down there every sort of month, and they're everywhere.
Your point is really well made, and we've got to get better at that. I mean, we've got a small R&D function within London Fire Brigade that looks at organisational and operational learning in particular. So drawing down international examples and also looking at where we can learn nationally. Now, we're much more embedded in the National Fire Chiefs Council than we probably were 10, 15 years ago, which was a detriment to us as an organisation. And it's only really by pooling our combined resources with other fire and rescue services in the UK and internationally that we can help to keep ahead of this changing nature of risk, not just in relation to lithium-ion batteries and modern technology, but climate change, international terror threats. What does that actually mean for the fire and rescue service? Our evolving role, because if you look at what's happening in Europe at the moment with fire and rescue services in Scandinavia and Poland and others, is their role is evolving to reflect the security picture that they're currently facing.
Yeah.
Now, I am really keen that we also...
It's hard to change our role. The unions seem very walking through treacle.
Well,
I'm a union rep or a member of a union.
We could get into a whole discussion around the role maps, but again, I go back to that 2002-3 dispute without wishing again to swing a lantern, and a lot of that fell from there. The problem was we're now in 2026, and that was back in 2002-3, and the world's a very different place. Now, to be fair to the FBU, and I meet with Steve Wright quite regularly, I have a very good relationship with our own FBU senior executive. I think there is also now a real opportunity for us to operate collectively for the benefit of the sector and everyone who's either an FBU member or not, in a way that I don't think was there 4 or 5 years ago. So again, similar to the College of Fire, as much as we're operating in a very, very challenging environment at the moment, I also think we've got the opportunity of a generation to reset the sector. And I see nothing but a positive trajectory of travel for fire if we are prepared to seize the opportunity. That's the big if. We absolutely have to seize that opportunity.
I think we're at the crest of a really, really unique generational wave, partially because so many people are retiring, not because anybody did anything wrong in the past, just because we're at a new turning point where loads of people are racing through the ranks in new positions, open-minded a bit more, or maybe they've just got a bit more organizational energy. These are my words. They've not been beaten over the head with no's for their 40-year career. I don't know. But I think we're at a very unique crest of a wave if we lean into it. And also, Steve's nice. I like Steve. No salt on Matt at all. Matt did a tremendous amount. He deserves lots of congratulations for the work he did with the FBU. But Steve messaged me every now and again on WhatsApp. They're very open to being part of conversations a lot more than I think historically they ever used to be, in my personal words. But I still think that the technological element of it, just to cycle back for a second, is not... I imagine from a global risk perspective and terrorism and all that jazz, I'm sure a lot of chiefs, and certainly yourself, probably got very close relationships with the inner workings of how government works, and you getting a heads up on that stuff. But I just think, to throw a little bit of salt in the government's way, I think there should be a bit tighter on organisations involved in technological development, that they must interact and converse and keep the first responder sector abreast of all the incredible work they're doing that's going to help us all. Most probably, I think most of the technological advancements will be mostly net positive, but they need to talk to us earlier on before they surprise the world and us with a new thing that we then have to catch when it goes wrong. I just think we're there. I know we don't want to send all the millionaires away. I know we don't want to discourage them from innovation. We're not trying to do that. But I just think they're not talking to us enough. I don't know what's happening at your level, but I just feel like they're not talking to us enough.
I have a regular contact with MHCLG and the Fire Minister and senior civil servants on a regular basis for reasons which you'll completely understand in terms of what we cover and manage within London. Yep. I think one of the challenges there is at the moment, and it's probably true of all public and private sector organisations, and the government is no different, is that it's really difficult at the moment. What a difficult operating environment. We've got so many competing demands. Public expectations are sky high, and the operating environment is completely different to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And one of the challenges when it comes to funding that we always have is we are but one voice in a very loud choir.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefights podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behaviour, firefighter health, answer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes.
When you're looking at defence spending on the NHS, spending on education, spending on border force, spending on police.
I bet you're the poor man in the room when everyone's there, aren't you?
So I get it. If I'm there as a government minister, or the Prime Minister or anyone else making those decisions, you've got all of these competing demands in a world that is moving at 100 miles an hour when you look at modern technology, on top of a very uncertain international picture, a very uncertain financial picture, and you're trying to find a path through all of that. And that's really, really difficult. It's one of the things that I'm constantly saying to our senior leadership team here, is that we are operating in a contested space at the moment across a whole range of different areas. Mm-hmm. And it was put brilliant to me by our Director of Comms, actually, when she said, Londoners have never needed the London Fire Brigade more than they do now. And I think that's absolutely true, because we have to be able to provide a path of certainty through a very uncertain period, and we need to be able to be adaptable to the challenges.
I think the fire brigade and the fire service has always had, of course I would say this, my own bias, we're speaking into an echo chamber. I think people trust us. I think as a moral compass in society, some people love and hate the police. They're either happy to see them, not happy to see them. We know why we call the ambulance, and they help us when we're really, really struggling, and they're incredible at that. We are very much the emergency bit. We are the, I don't know who's going to solve this, big red toolbox turns up, help me please. I think we are that answer, and I think people should, that's why we do the pink firefighter thing, because I think we should use our position as firefighters to try and be a moral compass for the causes, for the things, for the bits of social need that we don't think are being addressed, and we should do that. And I think we shouldn't undervalue our position as that. I think I want everyone to walk down the street, and if they see a firefighter, they should see it as a place of safety. They should be able to go to that person, even if they're not sure what the answer they're looking for is. That thing should be a positive symbol in everybody's mind. And I think people sometimes see that as stepping outside of our role and go, that's not our job, that's not our job. I'm like, we should be it's the right thing to do, people. You know what I mean? I feel like that's what we are. That's why I used to like fire stations being more community centres. Have the doors open.
Completely.
Let people in. I hate seeing doors closed.
And remember what they are. They're a community asset. It's where firefighters work. Of course it is. And they have a particular place in our hearts because they're fundamental to what we are. But they're also there for the community. That's what we're here for. And they need to be seen as that. You're right. Doors need to be open. We need to invite people in. And they need to be seen in that way. I completely agree with you.
I want to drag us kicking and screaming back to some of the points because it's my fault. You mentioned about training earlier, and I'm going to try and tie a thread back. Preparing our firefighters best for the future and all this sort of jazz. Who trains the firefighters in London? Because I am conscious, and it was a question from a listener. The Babcock contract will come to an end. I don't know how long they've been training firefighters for. Who trains who? What happens when that finishes? Give us a bit of an appraisal of what's happening there.
Well, we've got a mixed picture in terms of what our training looks like. So interestingly, so we do have an outsourced model, and that's been the case since 2012. And that's really around the large scale type training. So level 1 incident command, BA, CPD, driving, that sort of thing sits within that Babcock contract. One of the points I always make is that 90% of the training that our firefighters receive has got nothing to do with the Babcock contract. It's actually what they're doing day to day on fire stations. We've got niche capabilities that sit outside of the Babcock training contract. One of the things, and so we've got a different model. Now, one of the things that we're doing at the moment is working closely with Babcock to see, well, what does the next 10, 15 years look like? What is it, the types of training we need to be delivering to make sure, as I was saying before, that the risk that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis is the training keeps pace with that risk, because that's the only way we keep firefighters safe, and it's the only way we make sure that we're delivering the service the public expects. So we're having a big conversation about that at the moment around how we can take advantage of all of these proposals around a College of Fire and the centres of excellence that exist right across the country, and we need to be at the forefront of that and making sure that London firefighters are exposed to all of those opportunities. Similarly, we also have to understand what sits within our own gift. One of the big points that I've been making is around doing our basics brilliantly, which is in the hands of our station officers and sub-officers and leading hands and firefighters on station that because of the operating environment we're in, we've got to make sure we're ready. We've got to make sure we're ready. And actually 99.9% of that can be done on station in your own professionalism, taking that professional pride.
That is a frustration I have. People go, "Oh, the training centre's rubbish." And I'm like, well, you could be dragging hose, you could be doing this, you could be doing that, whether it's ladders, road traffic collisions, everyone has pretty much everybody has a yard that can facilitate the vast majority of base level skills, muscle memory, speed, efficiency, all of these elements can be drilled on a day-to-day basis. And it can be a very slopey shoulder cop-out when people say about, oh, we're not where we need to be with tactical firefighting. And I'm like, well, you could de-chunk that and do 80% of the fundamentals there. I appreciate you're not getting the feedback of the live fire, but that can sometimes be an overwhelming excuse for people not to do the basics. But I do also add in the factor that, and some people have said it, they're like, well, you mentioned earlier, like if London went to any one service or any one training or provider, you would swamp them. So if I'm sat at box table, I'm thinking, well, where else are you going to go? Because no one else can deal with this sort of capacity. So people might wonder, is the tail wagging the dog? And are they nervous about the National College of Fire? Going, well, hang on a minute, why are you going somebody else?
I think the opportunity within the College of Fire, Pete, is there's room for everyone. That's the thing that I'm genuinely excited about. That if you've got the right training offer and you've got the right capability that we can take advantage of, you can be part of that package that's available with that national consistency that applies right across the board. And yes, we're a big organisation and we bring large numbers. But if you look at the capacity that actually exists within the UK, it's all there. So whether it's at the Fire Service College down in the Cotswolds, whether it's in Scotland, whether it's in Northern Ireland, whether it's in Merseyside, whether it's in Manchester, I can see a time where we would send, let's say our USAR teams, we would send them to Merseyside to do USAR there. We might send our fire behaviour down to the Fire Service College to go and use the facilities there to do that type of work. We might send our incident command somewhere else. We might look at what capability we've got within London, but it's part of an overarching modern firefighting strategy, which we're working through at the moment to make sure we're just offering the best possible opportunities for our firefighters in whatever specialism it is that the UK now provides. Because the great thing, since I've been going around the country looking at other options in terms of training facilities, is it's all there. What's missing is the ability to bring it all together. And that's where I think the umbrella of the College of Fire is going to be really helpful if we can resource it properly, when we can all put our shoulders to the wheel. The opportunity there is enormous, and we would play a huge part in making that work. I'm absolutely determined to be at the forefront of all of that.
I think if we just have some really, really incredible team of Avengers in terms of logistics and planning, probably Green Book secondments to the NFCC, and there's a number of incredible people. I could probably, not that anyone asks my opinion, I could probably list from middle management and different senior leaders around the country who would be amazing in that job, because it is just a communication and logistics challenge, really. Because there's, like you say, you go around, and I get the privilege of inviting a lot of places. There's some great kept secrets.
There is.
Of training resources around the UK Fire and Rescue.
I saw a couple of years ago, I saw West Sussex training venue. I don't know if you've ever been there, Pete, but it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And there's probably loads of those that are all around the country that I'm not sighted on.
Is that Dawn? There's Dawn.
It was Sabrina, and I can't remember the chap who's taken over as the chief.
It was Sabrina, but I also went to see when Dawn Whitaker was... She was East Sussex.
Yeah.
I'm so terrible. Yeah, theirs is great as well. But anyway, there's some incredible ones out there.
To be fair,
I know we mentioned.
My view is that with the right planning and the right strategy, and we've proven we can do it when we've sent nearly 4,500 firefighters down to the college in Morton-on-the-Marsh. That with the right planning and prep, anything is possible. So I'm genuinely excited by that possibility moving forward.
I know we said we weren't going to echo the past too much, but I did want to bring it in. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we're the 10-year anniversary for Grenfell. You yourself, and obviously more the organisation, were recognised nationally for the variety of roles you play in it. What are some of the big dominoes that have changed operationally in terms of our high-rise firefighting, but especially around emergency evacuation? Because I think that was a massive element of the sort of feedback that came.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that next year will be the 10th anniversary, Pete, the truth be told. But,
mate, I was speaking to Peter Apps, the guy that wrote that book, and I just couldn't believe. I was like, 10 years, oh my God.
It's phenomenal.
Jeez.
I mean, my answer to this question is always that there are Londoners walking around the streets now who wouldn't be here otherwise if it wasn't for the changes that we made post-Grenfell. And I've seen that for myself as an incident commander. I was the incident commander of a fire at New Providence Wharf in 2021, which was a failing high-rise with people trapped inside. 15 fire survival guidance calls were on the board when I arrived on the scene as the assistant commissioner there. And it was the first time our new policy and procedure had been put into action following all of the changes we made post-2020. And they worked. And we were able to safely evacuate nearly 200 people from that building. Only minor injuries were involved. And as I said, we had 15 fire survival guidance calls on the board. And when I actually went on to the command unit where our fire survival guidance was being managed, I was actually expecting chaos. I thought, actually, I'm going to be walking into a really, really stressful and chaotic situation. The polar opposite was true. I went on there, it was calm. It was professional. The station commander, Chloe, who was on the command unit then, was just the epitome of professional, calm, and resolute. There was a very clear plan. I was left as the incident commander under no doubt about what we needed to do. And that's just one example. And we've seen that play out time and time again. The Dagenham fire at the Spectrum building. I had a phone call at 2:00 in the morning from Pat Goldborn, actually. He sent me pictures of the incident, and I looked at it and I thought,
I've met Pat.
Yeah, Pat's a great guy, and he was the incident commander on the scene for this particular incident, and he sent me pictures of the fire. And when I looked at it on my phone, I thought, if there's anyone in there, they're not coming out. We are looking at a multiple loss of life there, and I had to phone Andy Rowe up, which was one of the most difficult phone conversations I'd had at about 3:00 in the morning to explain that we were dealing with this situation. Now, because of the heroics of the crews and the control officers who were dealing in the initial stages of that incident, we were able to safely evacuate everyone out of that. It's worth looking up if you ever get a chance. It's safely evacuated from that building because we were following.
I'd love to do a debrief on it. I'll annoy you with a WhatsApp message.
It'd be well worth doing. And so when I look at the legacy, if you like, of what Grenfell has left to the London Fire Brigade and London more broadly, I look at our operational capability and competence when it comes to things like high-rise and mass evacuation and fire survival guidance call. If you look at what they do in control now to manage multiple fire survival guidance calls, Pete, if there's anyone in the world doing it better than us, I would be surprised.
We're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing. Blue light services do better together than apart. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. I'll see you there. The fire survival guidance element of it, 1,000,000%. I've had a couple of conversations with various control people. When I speak to Ben Levy, Levy, I always get the name wrong. I think he's still NFCC high-rise guy. They're doing a lot of work in the Manchester side of it. I would love to see, and I'm probably wrong, so please correct me, the national rollout of this. Because I know the lessons are being learned and shared, but I don't see them disseminate to other services. Obviously, London was the one that had the massive setback, huge tragedy. So rightly so, you've been most passionate about pushing forward and you've made all that progress, and that's incredible. But that kind of national learning, I think that's still moving not as quickly as I personally would like to see it go across and down and filter through. And I know a lot of that's probably outside of your sphere of control. You probably influence it.
We are heavily, and I think there's still more work for us to do, Pete. I mean, the one thing I always say about whether it's high-rise or whether it's anything else, is you have to be constantly restless about this sort of thing. Because the moment you think you've got it cracked is the moment you get found out. And you have to keep... And actually, going back to your point around modern technology, if you look at the way technology is developing, so drones, use of AI, use of smart buildings, all of these sorts of things, we've now got to start to think about how do we incorporate that into things like high-rise firefighting and some of our most dangerous operational incidents that we go and attend. If you look, drones in particular is something that really does excite me, because I think if you look at what they're doing in the Middle East in particular, in China and other places, the capability, particularly when you're talking about super high-rise, I can look out of my window here and see the Shard.
I went up the Burj Khalifa 2 weeks ago.
Well, there you go.
Whoa!
So how do you deal with a fire in the Burj? How do you deal with a fire in the Burj Khalifa? But I think the technology exists now that we need to be at the forefront of to see how we can bring that into our day-to-day operations. So there is definitely still more for us to do.
The drone system. Have you seen the spider system?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually recorded them about 6 months ago. I haven't put it out yet. I need to get that out. That one's interesting. Another option, challenges around the anchor point. I'm not going to try and fumble my way through it, but basically, I try to describe it as a vending machine.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Where it's like two anchor points at the top. People can go up and put them in retrospectively. But I just feel like that might be a cheaper solution. The drone stuff, people are scared about. When I was at Intersec, some of the drones are so incredibly powerful now. It's the lift, it's the water in the lift that people think aren't going to sustain it. Whereas I know the Spider model, they effectively have cables, and I'm describing it badly, but you attach cables to it, drones take them up, they come back down, grab this plate, which effectively has a branch on it, and you can move it like a vending machine around the building and do like an external offensive attack. But even like floor below branches and floor above blankets for wind-driven fires, is much of that making it? We're getting right into a segue. I need to be respectful of time, but is there any of that in London? You don't have floor below branches?
We don't have floor below branches, but we are looking at them. But we've got smoke blocking devices to make sure that you protect the stairwell. We've got a whole range of different procedure that we're now following to make sure that you're protecting the smoke.
Because like you say, the Alps and the TLs, past a certain height, I think we kind of, my words, not yours, feel free to push back or we can edit this out. But like some of those across the world got purchased as like a thing that the public might look at and go, are they going to rescue me from that? I'm like, the wind at that height, you are not going to transition. You might do in the 1,000,001 heroes example. You're going to try and get on that at 30 floors in that wind. You have not been up there and seen how much they shake.
We've got 3 64-meter turntable ladders, which are phenomenal. They're phenomenal bits of kit, Pete, without a doubt. And they have a rescue. They have a rescue capability. They absolutely do. But that's not how you cannot rely on them.
They're not a utopian answer to everything, though.
And that is not how you fight high-rise fires. They've got a role, and they're part of the strategy. But that is not what you can rely on. You've got.
It's one of the many tools we're going to need to solve the challenges of these vertical streets that just seem to keep getting higher.
Completely right. I know that London continues to grow. And continues to grow at height. We're on schedule to be one of the most high-rise cities in the world, and we have to make sure that our firefighting and rescue capability keeps pace with the development of the city that we've got responsibility for. And I think new technology is going to be critical to answering some of those questions as we move forward.
Let's keep moving. I want to get to the big, ugly word that seems to fumble its way around in buzzword bingo of culture, behavior, organizational reputation. You guys and girls have set up, I think it was one of the first professional standards units, which sounds scary. I've got pictures of people marching around hitting people with sticks. I'm sure that's not what it looks like in reality.
No.
But the cultural reviews that have happened over the last 10 years across the whole UK Fire and Rescue Service have painted a very ugly picture. And honestly, it's one of my things I try and do with the podcast is say, we're surrounded by incredible people all over the Fire and Rescue Service. Is there a few bad apples? Yes, of course there is, because we're a reflection of society, and every now and again one slips through the net. But we've gotten better at finding them out and either finding other ways for them to advance professionally outside of the Fire and Rescue Service. But what's that look like from London's perspective? Because like anywhere, London gets hit with the biggest stick when it comes to cultural stuff because it sits in the middle and everyone's staring at it.
Yeah, and our culture review when it landed in November 2022 was, a tectonic. It was a rough read. It was a rough read, and we all went through a gambit of emotions when we looked at, the view that it presented back of an organisation that I love to my core and the people in it, but the experiences of 2,500 people, both within the organisation and those who have left, you cannot ignore.
You can't ignore them, but I hated people walking around going, wouldn't let my daughter join the fire service. I'm like, why? Why?
Completely. And your point that you make as well, Pete, is absolute. We employ nearly 6,000 people, and we employ human beings. Funny enough, and they come with they come with their strengths,
and they're beautifully imperfect.
They come with their strengths, and they come with their weaknesses. But what we have got now is a very, very clear set of values, a very, very clear set of standards. And I often get frustrated when people, well, I don't know where the line is anymore. It was only, yes, you do. We have all got an inherent understanding of what's right and wrong. And the key thing is when poor behavior presents itself, it has to be dealt with. Because one of the most toxic things, and we certainly experience that as an organization, is if you do not challenge and do not deal with poor behavior when it presents itself, the toxicity that exists within the organization and the damage that it does to good people coming through is appalling. Now, on your particular point around the professional standards unit, the professional standards unit as a thing is actually quite a policing model. So that's sort of where it comes from. That's where its genesis comes from. It was actually a recommendation in the State of Fire report that was done by the Inspectorate back in 23-24, where they recommended fire services should look at professional standards.
Is that the one that Roy was involved in?
Yeah, it was exactly that one.
Yeah, we had him on talk about it. Yeah.
And we looked at it and thought, actually, there's something in this, and actually being able to bring this unit together to help us deal with poor behaviour and ensure that those who do commit actions that are not in line with our values are held to account. Now, but the professional standards unit is only one small part of an overarching piece that the brigade has to make sure it coalesces around. The fundamental areas where we make the biggest impression is local leadership. So the role and responsibility that sits at local leadership level is enormous. So I always say to our subs and station officers, you have far more influence over your watch and what you do on a day-to-day basis than I could ever dream of. I will say lots of nice things. I can write you a strategy document. We can have values that sit on the wall on a very nice poster. That's all good. But how you behave...
It will pale in comparison to your personal influence and leadership.
And that local leadership is absolutely pivotal, because we have to create an environment where the real potential that exists in this organisation, which I see I was North Kensington and Kensington fire stations yesterday, talking to the watches. Every Monday I go out to fire stations and just sit down with watches and just have a straightforward conversation. And it never ceases to amaze me, the talent that exists in the organisation. And we have to make sure we enable that talent to come through and rise if it wants to. If it wants promotion, great. But if not, look at other opportunities within the organisation. People have got to be enabled to flourish. And where you've got toxicity running through an organisation and you've got poor behaviour, it stops people being able to flourish within the organisation. And then we will never keep pace with those risks that I'm talking about before. If we do not allow talent to flourish and people to feel safe and secure when they come to work, guess what? We're going to be a shadow of the organisation that we need to be. So there's always a more.
Because I think 40% of you is being suppressed by that cultural ceiling and that toxicity. So the people that would and should and could and are passionate, and you see those flickers, like you say, when you do a station visit, and someone does like a mental tap dance with their own passion. You catch them in a moment of brilliance, and for you, it's probably hard because you're like, hey, have you spoke to so and so in this department? Like, they'd love you. Haven't even got a promotion if you don't want to. Just bang them an email. Here's their phone number, and then you see some of the other people around the table going, look, you're gonna follow up with John's mate after this, and you're like, shut up, behave yourself. You're not allowed to say that, but I'm like, the thing I
always look for, Pete, when I go and do a station visit, which is one of the most things that I enjoy about this particular role, I always sit down and I look around the table and I check who's talking, and actually is it just one person, or is everyone around that table, irrespective of timing or what they look like or what their religious belief is or who they choose to? Has everyone got the opportunity to ask questions and feel part of that watch? And that's always a mental check that I do. And I have to say, over the last few years in particular, what I've seen in London has been genuinely transformative. We've still got people in the organisation who I know we will have to deal with at some stage. That will always be the case. That will never, and that's where the PSU is actually proving real value. Still a work in progress, still quite new, and it's still only 2 years old and needs to bed down. But if I look at the types of conversations we now have on fire stations or in control or in our professional teams, it's a world away from where we were 7 or 8 years ago. So I really do see a direction of travel, but you have to be relentless about it, because culture's not a start and finish thing. You don't suddenly go from, we've got a really poor culture here, and now look, we're wonderful. That's not how it works. You have to keep
You have to get healthy the same way you
again.
got sick. Do you know what I mean? That's it for me. You have to get healthy the same way you got sick. These things don't happen quickly. You know, culture, friendship. You know, when you see a lot of people talking around a table, that for me is the best metric of psychological
Completely
safety
right.
on a watch. Is everyone feel comfortable to have their opinion? Now, some people go, "Oh no, my watch are just quiet out of respect for rank." I'm like, no. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second. I'm like, it doesn't mean your opinion isn't welcome. How you deliver it matters. You know, speak to me with
And
respect.
what's your intent?
Let's
What's your intent?
Yeah, what's your intent
Yeah.
behind it? What are you trying to get out of this? Do you know what I mean? Are you bringing a knife to the table, you know, metaphorically, or are you trying to be involved in this discussion? But I also say that if you can't see, you know, a role model across the watch table from you, you're at a massive disadvantage. We should have people around us that inspire us for a variety of
Completely
reasons,
right.
not just their capability on the fireground, but their moral compass.
I completely.
But I also have this little trick in the back of my head, and I'll not go on with it. But like, I always imagine if my dad, my mum, my sister, my missus, and my daughter, I imagine that they're watching everything I do. Like if some YouTube channel was following me around in my life, I'm like, is this the moment they would leave the room or shake their head? If I'm walking past a thing or if someone says a thing, would they be proud of seeing the person I pretend to be? Do you know what I mean? When I'm with them and the firefighter they think I am and all this jazz, like, am I that? So I try and think that all the time. Like, if my mum was watching me right now, would she be impressed or disappointed
Well,
with the
that's a good
behavior
way
or
of
the thing that
framing
I'm...
it, Pete. You know, are you the
Yeah.
firefighter that your wife or your mum or your kids or anyone else thinks you are? And if you can say, I always say to people, you've got to do the mirror test. You've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, right, today, have I done everything I possibly can to be the very best version of myself and support everyone that I work with and put everything I can into making the London Fire Brigade a better place? And if 9 times out of 10 you can say yes, I'll tell you what, we're not going to go too far wrong. And you can make mistakes. You see, this is the other thing. As long as what I again tend to say is that what was your intent? So was your intent to do the right thing, but actually the outcome didn't turn out in the way that you expected it to? Well, that's fine. As long as we learn from that and then we don't make that mistake again in the future, that's how organizations develop. But you have to have that psychological safety, to use that phrase.
I think the same with my relationship with my missus. I'm like, is my goal to understand and be understood, or do I want to be right? If you want to be right, you can be right or you can be happy. You know, you can seek to understand and seek to be understood, or do you just want to be right? And that you're just trying to beat people over the head with your opinion. Well, then you're not even you're just on broadcast. Like, come on.
Exactly.
Where's the humility?
You know, the benefit of difference, you know, it's enormous. You know, you can read all sorts of books. You can look at all the academic theory. We know that having a difference of opinion, a different sort of viewpoint makes us better firefighters. It makes us better officers.
Makes better people.
Completely. You know, even in an instant command scenario, if you're listening to the views of your command team and firefighters and you still have to make the decision, but you're actually giving yourself every option to listen to the views that are there and people feel safe to come forward. I tell you what, you're going to make better decisions and there's going to be a better outcome. And you just apply that to the organisation that you're running.
Got to keep having that humility, though. I always think about it with these conversations. How many mistakes have I made today? I've got a few people's names wrong, a few people's services wrong. I said accidentally said earlier that I was a union rep when I've never been a union rep. I just put that out there. And I'm like, no one cares. As long as you come at it with a bit of humility. I always call this listening out loud because I'm like, learning out loud, because I'm not going to get it right. But no one cares. You know, if you pretend you're right all the time, people will just see you as glossy. They're like you as a commissioner. It's like, get stuff wrong.
One of the great things about the station visits is that, no one's ever short of coming forward and telling me what I'm getting wrong on a regular basis. But that's great. Because funny enough, one of the walkies.
I'm glad I've got you, John. Here's my list of things you're ruining the service I love. Wonderful. Yeah,
well, it was.
Thanks so much. Have you also got some proposed solutions? Me, or are you just blame
throwing? No, and to be fair, you know, the conversation that I have on the station are brilliant, and it's what I get up for, if the truth be told. But yesterday, actually, I did say to the station officer, who said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. You know, we've gone through a bit of a moan list here." I said, you haven't at all, actually. That's not what you've done. I said, actually, there was some really useful feedback there. I've taken some notes to take away. And he did it in a really professional way. And do I know we've still got lots of work to do as an organisation? Yes. And we always will. Because, as I say, until we stop employing human beings and we just employ robots, we're still going to make mistakes. We're still going to do things in the wrong way. but it's what is in our gift is the intent. The intent is within our gift. And as long as we are always trying to strive to be better versions of ourselves and have a better organisation, then I'll tell you what, despite all of the challenges that we face, we're going to be in a good place. And that's the message you just have to keep coming back to time and time again. And I know the responsibility that sits on my shoulders to live that. It's easy for me to say it. It's easy for me to write it down in strategy documents and also, but you have to then live it and it has to be seen. And that's really, really important to me. And it's really important to the senior leadership of this organisation.
How do you do that? We're only going to take 10 more minutes because people won't know we're on a time cap today, but I want to zoom down to the local and the personal just as we sort of wrap it up, because the more senior leaders I tend to speak to, the more I feel I get insight. It's not necessarily come across too much today, though I imagine it's somewhere in the background. It looks like a very lonely job at times because you have got to keep, you have a professional head. You've got to keep certain things close to your chest, not because you're lying to anybody, but because there's some big dominoes at play and you're not privileged to talk about things that are still in progress. You don't want to promise the world and deliver nothing. How do you not go off sick for years at a time with anxiety and stress? What are your kind of like things that you hold on to in the storm of political and financial and people dying and everything else? Like, what do you do? What are your day-to-days? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it, I don't know.
There's a whole range of things, I think. But you're right. At times, when you sit in a very, very senior leadership role in an organisation, you can sometimes look around and go, where's everyone else? But the big thing for me is about the team that we've built within this organisation. So if I look at, my executive leadership team, and there's 6 of us within that leadership team, we are genuinely a collective endeavour. Because yes, the London Fire Commissioner sits there as a position and it's the figurehead of the organisation. But I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by people who are far more talented and capable than I am. And that's quite deliberate, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
I need people who are far more capable than I am in order to give us half a chance to run this organisation in the right way. And I'm very lucky with who I've got there. So there's a phenomenal support team that sits around me personally, but also the senior executive team. And then the tier underneath that around our senior leaders, if there's about 50 of those now, there's some phenomenal people who sit as part of the senior leadership team of this organisation who I absolutely rely on, and the vast majority of whom have got far more capability than I. I am quite self-aware in terms of the pressure that comes on sitting in this role. I mean, my sort of starting point, Pete, is that I'm a firefighter. I always have been. I just happen to be a firefighter who's now in a very senior position with some additional responsibilities that sits on my shoulders. Now, for me, that really works in grounding me in terms of every decision that I make. I put myself back to Firefighter Smith, sat on the truck, and what would he want Commissioner Smith to be doing? And I apply the same when I look at control, and I had the real privilege of spending 2 years in control in the aftermath of Grenfell, and they are always in the back of my mind because that's often a Cinderella part of the organisation that's probably not had the due care and attention that it should have had. And then all of our professional teams who actually enable us to do what we need to do on a day-to-day basis, and that really grounds me. So the work structure is really important in terms of my resilience and making sure this is seen genuinely as a team endeavour and a team effort. That's really, really important because no one individual can suddenly transform an organisation or have it. It's just physically impossible. And no
that level of ego would be dangerous for anyone, I think.
I like to think that anyone who says that they don't have an ego is lying. But
healthy ego. I've got a massive ego.
But what you have to be able to do is to park it, to make sure it doesn't get in the way of all of the other talent that exists within the organisation. That's really, really important. And then on a personal level, I do things like, I'm not sure whether this is good for my mental health or not, but I go and watch Watford FC on a regular basis, and that grounds me, Pete, the truth be told. And I'm very lucky.
You look like you're still hanging in the gym as well. I was going to ask you, I know you're a bit younger than some of the other chiefs out there, but I'm like, we got to lead by example. I'm not saying you're getting in there every day. I don't know what you're doing. Sounds like I'm blowing smoke up your ass at the end of it, but like, I find that's so important for my mental health. I can never stop being
massive. You know, chucking bits of metal around the gym is definitely my happy place, Pete. The truth be told, and I do try and be as relentless as I can be.
If we get too cognitive, I feel like that's not good for us. We've got to feel and move and do. Yeah.
So my family structure as well, Pete, is also very important to me. You know, I'm blessed with a fantastic, understanding wife, 2 great kids who make sure I don't ever get ahead of myself in terms of what I are. Who actually find my brother's job far more interesting than I. He's a A&E consultant, and he operates on the Northwest Air Ambulance. They think that's far.
That's a hard team to get onto. The air ambulance teams.
They think that's far cooler than being the commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, and they're probably right.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is ex-RAF, and he does some of that now. Wicked job.
So all of that keeps me grounded, Pete, the truth be told. But it's a team endeavour. That's the big thing. Yes, there's responsibilities that come with this role, which always weighs heavy on me. That we're always a moment away from a significant challenge to the organisation, whether it's operationally or whether it's in the HR space or whatever it may be. That's just the nature of where we are, and I accept it. But you cannot do this without that team.
You can't let that paralyze you.
No, you can't.
You've got to let that drive you to be ready and keep working and keep evolving and keep going, recycling the thought process.
Look yourself in
but if you thought about it too much, you would paralyze.
Look yourself in the mirror. You know, that's the thing for me. I have to look myself in the mirror every day and knowing, am I trying to do the very best I can for this organisation every single day? And as long as the majority of the time I can keep saying yes, all good. And that's it. Keep it simple, mate. Don't overcomplicate it.
Well, mate, look, I really appreciate your time today. I want to give a shout out to Amy for pacifying me with conversations on logistics yesterday. I was going to pop down, didn't pop down, did it this way. She's been awesome. So massive thanks to Amy. I'm going to let you crack on with solving the rest of the world and getting back to all the boys and girls doing some great work in London. But really appreciate your time today, brother. And I really hope we can do it again.
No, it's been a privilege, Pete. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.